Now let's begin. Marcus Murphy met Felicia Conway at a gallery opening in downtown Chicago. She wore a black dress that caught the light like oil on water, and when she laughed at his observation about a particularly pretentious sculpture, he thought he'd found someone who saw through the same bullshit he did. They married 8 months later in a ceremony that cost more than Marcus made in a year as a junior architect at Brennan & Associates. Willie Conway wrote the check without blinking, though he made sure Marcus saw the amount. "My daughter deserves the best," Willie had said, his hand heavy on Marcus's shoulder. "I trust you understand that." Marcus understood. He understood that Willie Conway built strip malls and medical plazas across 3 states, that he employed 200 people, that he measured a man's worth in square footage and profit margins. What Marcus didn't understand yet was that Willie Conway saw his daughter as another property to manage, and Marcus as a tenant who'd better not fall behind on rent. The first year passed in a blur of dinners at the Conway estate in Winnetka, where Carla Conway served prime rib and passive-aggressive comments about Marcus's quaint little Honda and starter salary. Felicia would squeeze his hand under the table, and Marcus told himself it didn't matter. They had their own apartment in Lincoln Park, their own life. Sunday dinners were just the price of admission. Then Felicia got pregnant, and everything shifted. A grandson, Willie announced at the dinner table, as if he'd produced the child himself. Finally, someone to carry on the Conway name. "Murphy," Marcus said quietly. "The baby's last name will be Murphy." The silence that followed had weight and teeth. Willie's fork scraped against his plate. Carla reached for her wine glass. Felicia looked at her lap. "Of course," Willie said finally, his smile sharp as fresh-cut glass. "Murphy, but he'll be a Conway where it counts. In here." He tapped his chest. "In his blood." Their son was born on a Tuesday morning in April. They named him Roland, after Marcus's grandfather who'd worked the steel mills in Gary, Indiana for 40 years. Willie had pushed for William or Conrad or Augustus, something with presence and history. Marcus had held his son, 8 pounds and furious at the world, and filled out the birth certificate himself. Roland Murphy. No middle name. Clean and strong. "You're making a mistake," Felicia said in the hospital room, her voice thin with exhaustion. "Daddy's just trying to help, by erasing my family." Marcus kept his voice level, watching Roland's tiny fingers curl and uncurl. "Your father doesn't help, Felicia. He conquers." She turned toward the window, and Marcus saw his wife clearly for perhaps the first time. She wasn't looking out at the Chicago skyline. She was looking at her own reflection, and she seemed surprised by what she found there. The visits started immediately. Willie and Carla descended on their Lincoln Park apartment like occupying forces, rearranging furniture, replacing Marcus's choice of crib with a hand-carved monstrosity that cost more than most cars, filling the nursery with toys Roland wouldn't be able to use for years. "A boy needs stimulation," Willie declared, installing what he called an educational mobile that looked like a corporate org chart. "Early development is crucial. I've read the studies." Marcus bit his tongue and focused on his work. Brennan & Associates had given him the Lakewood Community Center project, his first lead design. It was modest, nothing like the Conway Commercial Plaza Willie had just broken ground on, but it was his. He spent late nights at the drafting table, perfecting the sight lines, ensuring every dollar of the modest budget served the community that would use it. "Playing with your little drawings again?" Willie appeared in the apartment one evening, letting himself in with the key Felicia had given him. Marcus hadn't heard him arrive over Roland's crying from the nursery. "Working," Marcus said, not looking up from his blueprints. "Working." Willie's laugh was a bark. "You know what I did today? I closed a deal for the River North development. $40 million. That's working, son. What you're doing." He gestured at the blueprints. "That's a hobby that happens to pay bills." Marcus's jaw ached from clenching. "The baby's crying. Felicia's got him. That's what mothers do." Willie settled into Marcus's chair, uninvited. "We need to talk about your career trajectory. This architecture thing is fine for now, but long-term? I've got a position opening up. VP of Development. You'd learn the real estate game, make real money, build something that lasts." "I'm building something that lasts." Marcus finally looked up. "I'm designing spaces where people live and work and grow, where they make memories." "Memories?" Willie's expression suggested he'd smelled spoiled milk. "You can't deposit memories in a bank, Marcus. And you've got a son now. A son who deserves better than a 2-bedroom rental and a father who plays dress-up as an artist. The insult landed clean, and Willie knew it. Marcus gathered his blueprints, his hands steady despite the rage building in his chest. I should check on Roland. You should think about my offer. Willie stood, smoothing his suit jacket. Family takes care of family. But family also expects loyalty. Respect. You understand me. Marcus understood perfectly. Willie Conway was offering a golden cage, and the lock would click shut the moment Marcus stepped inside. The pressure mounted over the following months. Willie's visits increased. His opinions on Roland's care became commands. The suggestions about Marcus's career turned into interventions, with Felicia crying about their financial future, about giving Roland opportunities, about how her father only wanted what was best. He wants control, Marcus said during one particularly brutal argument. Can't you see that? He wants his grandson to have a good life. Felicia's face was blotchy with tears. Is that so terrible? Is it so terrible that my father cares? Caring doesn't come with conditions, Felicia. Everything comes with conditions. Grow up. Marcus started taking Roland to the park in the mornings before work, just the two of them. Roland was walking now, stumbling on chubby legs, laughing at pigeons. These were the moments Marcus hoarded like a miser counting gold. His son, his time, untainted by Willie Conway's vision of what they should be. The Lakewood Community Center opened to quiet praise. Local papers ran stories about the innovative use of natural light, the accessible design that served both children and seniors. Marcus's boss, Arthur Brennan, called him into the office. Good work, Murphy. Really good. I'm putting you up for the Harrison Heights project. Mixed-use development, $20 million budget. If you nail this, you're looking at senior architect by year's end. Marcus floated home, the offer letter in his briefcase, imagining Felicia's face when he told her. Maybe this would be enough. Maybe now Willie would back off. See that Marcus was building something real. He found Felicia on the phone with her mother, Roland playing with blocks on the living room floor. Her expression when she saw him was strange, guilty, and defiant at once. I have to go, Mom. He just walked in. She hung up. We need to talk. I have news. Marcus started, but Felicia cut him off. Daddy's giving us a house. The words hung in the air like a grenade with a pulled pin. What? A house? In Winnetka. For bedrooms, finished basement, quarter-acre lot. It's 2 blocks from their place. He had the papers drawn up. We can move in next month. Felicia's words tumbled out in a rush. Marcus, it's a real house. Roland would have a yard, good schools. We'd finally have space. No. You haven't even seen it. I don't need to see it. Marcus set his briefcase down carefully. Your father doesn't give gifts, Felicia. He makes investments. And this one comes with a price tag we can't afford. The house is free. Nothing is free with Willie Conway. You know this. I know you know this. Felicia's face hardened into an expression Marcus had seen before, on her father. You're being paranoid and ungrateful. My parents want to help us. They want Roland to grow up with stability, with opportunities. But you're so proud, so stubborn, you'd rather keep us in this cramped apartment just to prove some point about independence. I'd rather keep our son away from your father's control. Daddy loves Roland. Your father loves possessions. Marcus's voice stayed level, but his heart hammered. And he's very good at making people believe ownership is love. They fought for 3 hours. Felicia cried, then screamed, then went cold and silent. In the end, she slept in the nursery with Roland, and Marcus lay awake in their bed, staring at the ceiling, knowing something fundamental had broken. They moved to Winnetka 2 months later. The house was beautiful in the way museums are beautiful, perfect and cold, and designed to impress rather than comfort. Marcus watched movers carry their modest furniture into rooms that swallowed it whole, watched Felicia direct traffic with a confidence she'd never shown in their Lincoln Park apartment. She belonged here. He didn't. Isn't it wonderful? Carla Conway appeared at his elbow, her perfume sharp and expensive. Felicia grew up 3 blocks that way. Now Roland will have the same advantages. Advantages, Marcus repeated. Good schools. Safe streets. The right kind of people. Carla's smile was porcelain smooth. Willie says you're working on some project in the city? Harrison Heights. Mixed-use development. How nice. Her tone suggested it was anything but. Of course, with the commute from here, you'll need to be more selective about your hours. Family time is important. Willie always made it home for dinner. The trap was already closing, and they'd been in the house less than an hour. The pattern established itself with horrifying speed. Willie appeared every morning at 7:30, just dropping by on his way to the office. He'd critique Marcus's suit choice, question his parenting decisions, mention job openings at Conway Development. Roland started calling him Poppy, and Willie beamed like he'd won a war. Dinner became a nightly ritual at the Conway estate. Carla would set an extra place, and Felicia would pack Roland up without asking if Marcus wanted to go. The few times he suggested eating at home, Felicia looked at him like he'd proposed burning the house down. "It's just dinner, Marcus. They're my parents. We're supposed to be building our own family. We are. This is what family looks like." Marcus threw himself into the Harrison Heights project, staying late at the office, finding refuge in the clean logic of load-bearing walls and traffic flow patterns. His design was taking shape, a development that would bring affordable housing and small businesses to a neighborhood that desperately needed both. It was the kind of work that mattered, that would outlast him. Willie, predictably, hated it. Affordable housing, he scoffed one Sunday, after Felicia had mentioned the project with what Marcus recognized too late as deliberate provocation. "You're designing future slums. Properties that'll drag down everything around them." "I'm designing homes for people who need them," Marcus said. "You're wasting your talent on charity work." Willie cut into his steak with surgical precision. "That Harrison Heights parcel? I looked into it. Prime location, great bones. In the right hands, it could be luxury condos, high-end retail. Real value. It's already in the right hands." "Is it?" Willie's eyes were cold. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like idealism masquerading as architecture. And idealism doesn't pay your mortgage." "Oh wait, you don't have a mortgage." "Because I bought your house." The silence was absolute. Carla studied her wine glass. Felicia found something fascinating on her plate. Roland, mercifully, was in the other room with his toys. "The house is in Felicia's name," Marcus said carefully. "A gift to your daughter. Everything I give my daughter is mine until I say otherwise." Willie smiled. "That's how ownership works, son. I thought an architect would understand foundation and structure. Everything built on my land belongs to me, including you." Marcus stood, his chair scraping against the hardwood. "Roland and I are leaving." "Sit down," Felicia hissed. "We're leaving," Marcus repeated. "Now." He collected Roland from the playroom, ignoring Carla's protests and Felicia's sharp whispers. His son looked up at him with confusion but didn't cry. Marcus carried him to the car, buckled him in, and drove home through streets that didn't feel like home at all. Felicia arrived 2 hours later, her face a mask of cold fury. "How dare you embarrass me like that? How dare I?" Marcus's control finally snapped. "Your father just told me I'm his property, and you said nothing." He was making a point. "Yeah, the point that he owns us. That this house, our marriage, our son, it's all his to manage." Marcus moved closer, searching his wife's face for any sign of the woman he'd married. "When did you become his employee, Felicia? When did you stop being my partner? When you stopped providing?" The words came out flat and final. "You make $60,000 a year, Marcus. Daddy offers you a position making 3 times that, and you refuse out of pride. You'd rather have us scraping by so you can play artist with other people's buildings. I'm not playing. I'm building a career, a reputation. You're building nothing. Daddy builds. Daddy creates. You just draw pretty pictures and hope someone pays you for them." The marriage ended that night, Marcus realized. It was already dead, they just hadn't buried it yet. Things got worse. Willie's visits increased to twice daily. He had opinions on Roland's diet, his toys, his bedtime. When Marcus tried to establish boundaries, Felicia sided with her father every time. The Harrison Heights project became Marcus's only sanctuary, the one place Willie Conway's reach didn't extend. Then Willie tried to extend it. "I spoke to Arthur Brennan yesterday," Willie mentioned casually one morning, ambushing Marcus in his own kitchen. "Good man. Known him for years. Told him I was concerned about your workload, the stress of the Harrison Heights project. Suggested he might want to bring in additional support." Marcus's coffee mug stopped halfway to his mouth. "You did what?" "I'm helping. That project's too big for someone at your level. You need experienced hands." Willie's smile was paternal poison. "I recommended Hugo Adams. He's one of mine, does all our commercial work. He'll make sure things stay on track. That's my project. Mine. And it'll stay yours. With proper supervision." Willie checked his watch. "Speaking of which, Roland should be up soon. I thought I'd take him to the park. Get him out of your hair so you can focus on work. No. Excuse me. No. You're not taking my son to the park. You're not interfering with my project. You're not walking into my house uninvited anymore. Marcus set his mug down with exaggerated care. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. You're going to call Arthur Brennan and tell him you made a mistake. And you're going to step back from my family. Willie's expression didn't change, but something moved behind his eyes, something ancient and mean. That's not how this works, son. I'm not your son. No. You're the man who married my daughter, who lives in my house, who raises my grandson. You're mine whether you like it or not. Willie stepped closer, and Marcus realized with cold clarity that this was what Willie had wanted all along. The confrontation. The excuse. Now you can accept that and make this easy on everyone. Or you can keep fighting and watch everything you care about disappear. Choice is yours. Marcus heard footsteps on the stairs. Felicia, drawn by the voices. What's going on? She asked, but her tone said she already knew, already blamed Marcus. Your husband is having trouble understanding family loyalty, Willie said. Maybe you can explain it better than I can. Felicia looked between them, and Marcus saw her make the calculation. Saw her weigh love against comfort, partnership against security. Saw her choose. Marcus, just apologize to Daddy. This is ridiculous. Apologize for what? Setting boundaries in my own home. It's not your home. The words exploded out of her. Nothing is yours. The house is mine. Roland is my son. And you're just the man I made a mistake with. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, that Marcus almost laughed. He'd been outmaneuvered from the start. Willie had never intended to accept him. The gifts, the house, the pressure, it was all designed to create this moment. To prove that Marcus could be broken, that Felicia would choose her father, that Willie Conway always won. Okay, Marcus said quietly. Okay. He turned and walked up the stairs. Behind him, he heard Felicia's confused, "Where are you going?" and Willie's satisfied silence. Marcus packed a bag, then went to Roland's room. His son was awake, standing in his crib, reaching for Marcus with complete trust. Marcus lifted him out, held him close, felt the weight of 2 years of love and hope and desperate protection. "We're going on an adventure, buddy," Marcus whispered. He changed Roland, packed his essentials, and walked back down the stairs. Felicia and Willie stood in the foyer, blocking the door. They'd expected Marcus to come down alone, defeated, ready to negotiate. They hadn't expected him to leave with Roland. "What are you doing?" Felicia's voice climbed toward hysteria. "Taking my son away from people who think love is a transaction." "You can't," Willie started, but Marcus cut him off. "Watch me." He pushed past them, Roland on his hip, the diaper bag over his shoulder. He made it to the car before Felicia caught up, grabbing his arm. "Marcus, please. Don't do this. We can work this out." "You made your choice," Marcus said, buckling Roland into his car seat. "I'm making mine. If you leave with him, I'll call the police." "Call them." Marcus closed the car door, turned to face his wife. "I'm his father. We're going to my brother's place in Indianapolis. You want him back, we'll do this through lawyers." He drove away, watching Felicia shrink in the rearview mirror, Willie's hand on her shoulder like a handler calming an asset. Roland babbled in the back seat, oblivious to the fact that his whole world had just shattered and reformed. Marcus didn't cry until they hit the Indiana border. The next 3 years were war. Felicia filed for divorce and full custody. Willie hired Preston and Blake, the most ruthless family law firm in Chicago, and proceeded to paint Marcus as an unstable kidnapper who'd stolen a child in a fit of rage. Marcus scraped together enough for a decent lawyer, but he was outgunned and outspent. The custody hearing was brutal. Willie sat in the gallery like a judge at someone else's trial, watching his money work. The Conway lawyers presented Marcus as temperamental, financially insecure, and unable to provide stability. They brought up the Lincoln Park apartment, the modest salary, the fact that Marcus had abandoned the beautiful home Willie had provided. Marcus's lawyer, a sharp woman named Beth McMahon who took the case for less than she was worth, fought back hard. She got the house situation on record, got Willie's controlling behavior documented, got Felicia to admit under cross-examination that she'd given her father a key to their home without Marcus's knowledge. "And when your husband objected to these unannounced visits?" Beth asked. He was being paranoid, Felicia said, but her voice wavered. Paranoid? About a man who, by your own testimony, visited twice daily, had opinions on every aspect of your son's care, and attempted to interfere with your husband's career? My father was trying to help. Help. Like when he called Mr. Murphy's boss to suggest bringing in outside supervision on a project Mr. Murphy was leading? Felicia had no answer for that. The judge, a tired-looking woman named Rita Alvarez, awarded joint custody with primary residence to Marcus. Visitation rights for Felicia, supervised initially given the pattern of third-party interference in the marriage. Willie's face turned the color of raw meat. This isn't over, he hissed as they left the courthouse. I'll bury you, Murphy. I'll destroy everything you touch. Marcus believed him. But he had Roland, and that was the only thing that mattered. He moved to Indianapolis permanently, renting a modest apartment in Fountain Square. His brother Tomas had a contracting business and gave Marcus enough side work to supplement his savings while he looked for architecture positions. It was humbling, going from lead architect to essentially starting over, but it was honest work. Clean. Roland adjusted better than Marcus had any right to hope. At 4 years old, he was resilient in the way children are, finding joy in the small apartment, in the park down the street, in the routine Marcus built for them. Breakfast together. Daycare while Marcus worked. Evenings at the library or the children's museum. Weekends exploring Indianapolis, building a new life brick by brick. Felicia's visits were tense. She'd drive down from Chicago monthly, spend a supervised afternoon with Roland at a family center, then drive back. She never asked about Marcus's life, never acknowledged the aftermath of her choices. She was polite and distant, a stranger who happened to share a son with him. Willie never came, but his presence shadowed every interaction, every child support payment that arrived exactly on time, every expensive gift that showed up for Roland's birthday. The message was clear. I'm still here. I still have power. I'm just waiting. Marcus focused on building something Willie couldn't touch, his relationship with his son. He taught Roland to ride a bike, to throw a baseball, to ask questions about everything. He read to him every night. The two of them piled on the couch with library books, creating worlds Willie Conway couldn't buy his way into. And Marcus worked. He got hired by a small firm called Meridian Design, working on schools and community centers and libraries. The pay wasn't spectacular, but the work mattered. He poured everything into it, all the rage and pain and determination to prove that he was more than Willie's assessment of him. His breakthrough came 3 years after the divorce, when his design for the Riverside Elementary School renovation won a regional AIA award. It wasn't a huge deal in the grand scheme of things, but it was recognition. Proof that Marcus Murphy could build something that lasted, something that mattered. The award came with a feature in Midwest Architecture Review. Marcus almost didn't let them take his photo, but Roland insisted, proud of his dad in a way that made Marcus's throat tight. 2 weeks after the article published, Meridian's senior partner, Philip Lawrence, called Marcus into his office. You've been approached, Philip said, sliding a letter across the desk. Barton and Shore. Out of Cleveland. They're expanding, looking for someone to head their education division. They read the Mar article. They want you. Marcus stared at the letter, at the salary offer that was triple what he currently made, at the title, Director of Educational Design. It's a good opportunity, Philip continued. Better than I can offer you here. You should take it. Marcus didn't know what to say. I need to think about Roland, about moving. They're offering relocation assistance. Good schools in Cleveland. And Marcus? Philip's expression was kind. You've rebuilt yourself here. That's admirable. But you're ready for more. Don't let fear or the past keep you from what you've earned. Marcus took the job. He and Roland moved to Cleveland 6 weeks later, into a modest house in Cleveland Heights with a yard and good schools and neighbors who didn't know about Willie Conway or custody battles or any of it. They were just Marcus and Roland Murphy, starting fresh. Roland thrived. At 7 years old, he was bright and curious and funny, with Marcus's dry wit and an independence that sometimes scared Marcus with its fierceness. He excelled in school, made friends easily, and never once asked why they didn't see Mommy more or why Poppy never visited. Felicia's visits dropped off. Once every other month, then quarterly, then just phone calls on birthdays and holidays. Marcus knew Willie had probably written them both off as lost investments, moved on to other conquests. It should have felt like victory, but mostly it felt like waste. All that potential for love curdled by one man's need for control. Marcus built his career methodically. Barton and Shore became one of the Midwest's premier educational design firms, with Marcus leading the charge. He designed schools that won awards, that changed how people thought about learning spaces. He built a reputation for innovation and for actually listening to teachers and students instead of imposing his vision on them. He also built wealth, though he didn't think about it that way. He just worked hard, got promoted to VP, then partner. He invested carefully, saved aggressively, always aware that financial security meant freedom from people like Willie Conway. By Roland's 10th birthday, Marcus had accumulated more than he'd ever imagined. Not Willie Conway money. That level of wealth required a willingness to devour people, and Marcus had no appetite for it, but enough. Enough to protect Roland. Enough to never be vulnerable again. He also kept tabs on Willie Conway. Not obsessively, just periodic checks through business contacts and Google alerts. Willie's commercial development empire had continued to expand through Roland's early childhood. More strip malls, more medical plazas, the Conway name stamped across 3 states like a brand. Then, about a year ago, Marcus noticed the cracks beginning to show. A deal in Michigan fell through. Then another in Wisconsin. Conway Development pulled out of a major project in Columbus, citing strategic refocusing. The business press covered it blandly, but Marcus recognized the language. Willie was in trouble. Marcus did nothing with the information. It wasn't his concern. He had Roland. He had his career. He had a life he'd built from rubble. Whatever happened to Willie Conway was just karma working at its own pace. Then, on a Tuesday morning in October, his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize, but a Chicago area code he knew too well. Marcus almost didn't answer. But something, curiosity, or perhaps the ghost of the man he'd been before Willie Conway broke him, made him pick up. "Hello. Marcus. It's Willie." The voice was the same, but something in it had corroded. Age or desperation or both. "Willie," Marcus said neutrally. "I need to talk to you. Man to man." "About?" Willie paused, and the pause said everything. "About a business matter." Marcus said nothing. "My company is going through a rough patch." Willie continued, each word dragged out like a tooth being pulled. "Liquidity issues. Some deals went bad. I'm restructuring, but I need bridge financing. Short term, 90 days max. I'll pay 10% interest." Marcus understood then, with perfect clarity, why Willie was calling him instead of a bank. The banks had already said no. "How much?" Marcus asked. $2 million. The number hung in the air. It was substantial, but not impossible. Marcus had it, though Willie couldn't know that. Or maybe he did. Maybe Willie kept tabs on Marcus the same way Marcus kept tabs on him, monitoring the enemy, even in peace. "That's a lot of money," Marcus said. "I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate." The admission clearly cost Willie something. "And I'm asking his family. You were married to my daughter, you're Roland's father. That has to count for something." "Family." The word tasted like ashes in Marcus's mouth. "I need to think about it," Marcus said. "I need an answer by Friday." Willie's control was fracturing, desperation bleeding through. "Please, Marcus. I'm asking for help." Marcus ended the call and sat in his office, his hands shaking slightly. Across the room, a framed photo showed Roland at his 5th grade graduation, grinning gap-toothed at the camera. Marcus remembered that day, remembered Roland's excitement, his pride in his academic award, the easy affection between them. He thought about another moment, 5 years ago. Roland in his arms, juice spilled on Willie Conway's precious hardwood floor, Willie's voice like a hammer. "Hit him, or I will." The memory was crystalline, perfect in every detail. Roland's confusion. Felicia's silent compliance. Willie's absolute certainty that violence was an appropriate response to a toddler's accident. Marcus picked up his phone and texted Willie, "Come to Cleveland. Friday. We'll talk in person." Willie's response came immediately, "Thank you. I'll be there." Marcus had 3 days to prepare. 3 days to decide exactly how to handle the man who'd tried to destroy him. Willie Conway arrived at Marcus's office on Friday at 2 p.m. sharp, and the change in him was shocking. The man who'd radiated predatory confidence now looked diminished, his expensive suit hanging slightly wrong, his handshake less crushing. Age had carved new lines in his face, and desperation had drawn them darker. "Nice place," Willie said, looking around Marcus's corner office with its view of Lake Erie. "You've done well for yourself." I work hard. I can see that. Willie settled into a chair uninvited, an echo of his old authority. Thank you for seeing me. Marcus sat across from him, let the silence build. Willie Conway, the man who'd weaponized words and money and control, now had to ask for help. The reversal was exquisite. I looked into your situation, Marcus said finally. Conway Development is hemorrhaging. The Deerfield project collapsed when your anchor tenant pulled out. The River North development is stalled because of permitting issues, which I suspect are actually contractor payment issues. You've got 3 lawsuits from subcontractors claiming non-payment. Your credit lines are maxed out, and you're leveraged to the ceiling. Willie's face went pale. You've been busy. I have good contacts. And you're not exactly subtle when you're drowning. Marcus leaned forward. $2 million doesn't fix your problems, Willie. It buys you maybe 60 days. Then what? I've got deals in the pipeline. You've got desperation in the pipeline. You're making bad bets, trying to save bad bets. It's a death spiral. Marcus kept his voice clinical, a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. The real question is why you think I'd give you money knowing this. Because I'm family. Willie's voice cracked slightly. Because Roland deserves to have a grandfather who's not a failure. The manipulation was so transparent, so pathetic, that Marcus almost pitied him. Almost. Roland has what he needs, Marcus said. A father who loves him. Stability. Safety. Everything you tried to deny him. I never. You told me to hit him, Willie. Your 2-year-old grandson spilled juice, and you told me to hit him or you would. Do you remember that? Willie's face froze. I was trying to teach discipline. You were trying to teach him fear. The same way you taught Felicia. The same way you tried to teach me. Marcus stood, moved to the window. I picked up my son that day, and I walked out of your life. Best decision I ever made. Marcus, please. I know I made mistakes. Mistakes. Marcus turned back to face him. Is that what we're calling abuse now? Control? Emotional terrorism? I was trying to help. Everything I did was to give my family the best life possible. No. Everything you did was to prove you were in charge. To make sure everyone knew that Willie Conway owned them. Marcus's voice stayed level, but the rage underneath was ice cold and absolute. You didn't love your daughter. You managed her. You didn't want a grandson. You wanted an heir. And you didn't want me to succeed. You wanted me to fail so you could be the savior. Willie stood, his hands shaking. So what? You're going to let me lose everything. That's your revenge. I'm not going to let you do anything. Your choices led you here. Your arrogance, your cruelty, your absolute certainty that money could solve everything and control everyone. Marcus moved back to his desk. You destroyed yourself, Willie. I just get to watch. I'm begging you. Willie's voice broke. Please. For Felicia, for Roland. Don't. Marcus's tone could have cut glass. Don't invoke my son's name. You lost the right to that 5 years ago when you threatened to beat him. Willie's face crumbled, and for a moment, Marcus saw the scared old man beneath the bully. But he felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity. Just a vast and empty certainty that this was justice, delayed but inevitable. Get out, Marcus said quietly. Marcus, get out of my office. Drive back to Chicago. And the next time you need something, ask the grandson you wanted to teach through violence. See what he says. Willie left without another word. Marcus watched from his window as Willie's car pulled out of the parking lot and disappeared into traffic. Then he sat at his desk and waited for his hands to stop shaking. That evening, Roland came home from school excited about a science project, and Marcus listened to him talk about photosynthesis and chlorophyll with the intensity only a 10-year-old could bring to plant biology. They made dinner together, did homework at the kitchen table, played chess before bed. Normal. Safe. Built on a foundation Willie Conway could never touch. Later, after Roland was asleep, Marcus's phone rang. Felicia, Daddy called me, she said without preamble. He said you refused to help him. That's right. How could you? He's in real trouble, Marcus. He could lose everything. He already lost everything that mattered. Marcus kept his voice low, aware of Roland sleeping upstairs. He lost you. He lost Roland. He lost any chance at a real relationship with either of us. The business? That's just catching up. He's my father. And you chose him over your son. Over us. So you fix his problems, Felicia. You bail him out. You've got the Conway name and presumably some inheritance. Cash it in. I don't have that kind of money, and you know it. Daddy kept control of everything. Sounds like a pattern, Marcus said. Good night, Felicia. He hung up and turned off his phone. Tomorrow, he'd take Roland to the Science Museum. They'd explore the new space exhibit, get ice cream, be father and son without the shadow of Willie Conway between them. But tonight, Marcus allowed himself to imagine Willie Conway sitting in that Winnetka mansion, surrounded by all the things he'd accumulated, finally understanding that none of it meant anything, that he'd traded love for control and ended up with neither. The phone call came Sunday morning. Willie's voice was raw, stripped of every pretense. "I'll give you anything. Please, name your price." Marcus almost hung up. Then he thought of Roland, of the conversation they'd have someday about grandparents and family and what it means to make a stand. Put Roland on the phone, Marcus said. "What? My son. Your grandson. The boy you wanted to beat for spilling juice. Ask him for money." "Marcus, that's... Do it, or this conversation is over." Marcus heard shuffling, confused voices, then Roland's sleepy hello. "Hey buddy, sorry to wake you. There's someone who wants to talk to you." Marcus kept his tone light. "It's Willie Conway, your mother's father. He needs to ask you something." Marcus handed the mental phone to the man who'd tried to destroy him, and waited. "Roland." Willie's voice shook. This is Poppy. Do you remember me?" Marcus watched his son's face in his mind, confused, maybe a little curious, but not attached. "Not owned." "I guess," Roland said. "You visited when I was little." Yes, I did." "Roland, I need your help. I need to borrow some money from your father, and I wanted to ask you if that would be okay." The silence stretched. Marcus could hear his son thinking, processing, probably wondering why a grandfather he barely remembered was asking a 10-year-old for permission to borrow money. Finally, Roland spoke. 5 words that Marcus knew would haunt Willie Conway for whatever remained of his life. "Why would Dad help you?" The question was asked in simple curiosity, without malice or understanding of its weight. But those 5 words contained everything. The years of distance, the absence of relationship, the complete lack of foundation for such a request. Willie screamed, an inarticulate sound of rage and loss and final, absolute defeat. Then the line went dead. Marcus took the phone gently from his son's hand. "Sorry about that, buddy. Adult stuff. Go back to sleep." "Was that guy okay?" Roland asked, already drowsy. "He will be," Marcus said. "Eventually." He kissed his son's forehead and let him drift back to sleep. Then Marcus went downstairs, poured himself a drink he didn't really want, and allowed himself a single moment of pride. Not in Willie's destruction. That was incidental, the natural consequence of a lifetime of cruelty and control. But in Roland. In raising a son so secure, so loved, so free from Willie Conway's poison that he could ask that question with genuine innocence. "Why would Dad help you?" Because Dad had no reason to. Because the grandfather Roland barely knew had shown him only threat and demand, never love. Because Marcus had built something stronger than Willie's empire, a relationship based on actual affection rather than obligation and fear. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I hope you're happy. You destroyed my father. Felicia." Still not understanding, even now. Marcus typed back, "Your father destroyed himself. I just survived him. There's a difference." He blocked the number and finished his drink. Tomorrow, he and Roland would go to the museum as planned. They'd look at stars and planets and the vast universe beyond their small lives. Roland would ask questions about black holes and gravity, and Marcus would answer as best he could. And somewhere, Willie Conway would sit in his empty mansion and finally understand what he'd traded for control. The next week, Marcus heard through the business grapevine that Conway Development had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Willie's commercial empire, built over 40 years, collapsed in on itself like a dying star. The lawsuits multiplied. Former business partners circled like sharks. The Conway name, once synonymous with success in Chicago commercial real estate, became a cautionary tale. Marcus felt nothing about it. It was information distant and irrelevant to his actual life. Felicia called one more time, 3 weeks later. Marcus answered only because Roland asked if they could see Mom soon, and Marcus wanted to arrange a visit. "You won," Felicia said, her voice hollow. "Is that what you wanted to hear?" "I didn't want to win," Marcus said. "I just wanted to protect my son and build a decent life. Your father made those things incompatible with staying in your family. He's in the hospital now. Heart attack. Stress-related." She sounded like she expected Marcus to care. The doctors say he might not make it. I'm sorry you're going through this, Felicia. Truly. But it doesn't change anything. He asked for you. At the hospital. He wants to apologize to Roland. No. Marcus. No. I won't expose Roland to his manipulation. Not even on his deathbed. Especially not on his deathbed. Marcus's voice was firm. If Willie wants to apologize, he can write a letter. Roland can decide when he's older if he wants to read it. You're so cold. I'm protective. There's a difference you never learned. Marcus gentled his tone slightly. How are you doing? Really? The question seemed to surprise her. When she answered, her voice was smaller than he'd ever heard it. I don't know. Everything's gone. The house, the money, the life I thought I'd have. Mom's barely speaking. She blames me for losing you, for you refusing to help Dad. Like it's my fault everything collapsed. It's not your fault, Marcus said. But it's also not my problem to fix. You made your choices, Felicia. You stood by while your father tried to control every aspect of our lives, tried to teach our son through fear, tried to destroy my career because I wouldn't submit. You chose him over us, repeatedly. These are the consequences. I was trying to keep the family together. You can't keep together what was never whole. Your family was built on control and conditional love. It was always going to collapse. Marcus paused. But you can build something new, separate from your parents, from their money, from all of it. It won't be easy, but it's possible. I did it. I don't know how, she whispered. Therapy, a job, boundaries, small steps. Marcus surprised himself with the kindness in his voice. You're Roland's mother. If you want a relationship with him as he grows up, you need to become someone worthy of that. Not Willie Conway's daughter. Just Felicia. Whoever she is underneath all the damage. They ended the call with an agreement for Felicia to visit Roland the following month. Marcus didn't know if she'd actually do the work to change, but he'd offered the map. Whether she followed it was her choice. Willie Conway died 6 weeks later. Heart failure, the obituary said, though Marcus suspected it was really a failure of purpose. Without his empire, without control over anyone, Willie had simply run out of reasons to keep fighting. Marcus took Roland to the funeral because it felt like the right thing to do. Roland wore a suit Marcus had bought him for school concerts and looked uncomfortable in the church pew. Did you know him? Roland whispered during the service. A long time ago, Marcus whispered back. He was married to Grandma Carla, your mom's father. Why didn't we see him? Because he wasn't a good man, buddy. He hurt people, and I kept you away from that. Roland nodded, accepting this with the straightforward logic of childhood. The service continued with polished eulogies that painted Willie as a pillar of the community, a business titan, a family man. No one mentioned the lawsuits or the bankruptcy or the trail of people he'd crushed building his kingdom. Carla Conway looked ancient, lost in her black dress. Felicia sat beside her, propping her up, both of them hollow-eyed and diminished. Marcus caught Felicia's eye across the church and nodded. She nodded back, and in that small gesture was everything. Grief and regret and acknowledgement of all the ways they'd failed each other. At the reception afterward, no one approached Marcus. The Conway family friends and business associates seemed to recognize him as the architect of Willie's final downfall, though that wasn't quite right. Marcus had simply refused to be Willie's life preserver. Willie had drowned on his own. As they were leaving, Carla stopped them in the church parking lot. You killed him, she said, her voice reedy and vicious. You let him die. Roland moved closer to Marcus, uncertain. Marcus put a hand on his son's shoulder. Willie died because he built his life on sand and called it bedrock, Marcus said quietly. I'm sorry for your loss, Carla, but I protected my son. I'd do it again. He guided Roland to the car, and they drove home to Cleveland, leaving Chicago and the Conway family in the rearview mirror for what Marcus hoped was the last time. 5 years after Willie Conway's death, Marcus stood in his home office reviewing the plans for his latest project, a new arts high school in Detroit that would serve underprivileged students. It was ambitious and complex, and exactly the kind of work that made him glad he'd become an architect. Roland, now 15, knocked on the door frame. He'd shot up over the past year, nearly Marcus's height now, with his father's dark hair and his mother's sharp cheekbones. He held his phone in one hand and looked troubled. Dad, Mom just texted. She wants to have dinner next week when I visit. Says there's something she wants to talk about. Okay, Marcus said carefully. Felicia had rebuilt her life slowly, painfully. She'd moved to a modest apartment, gotten a job as a paralegal, attended therapy religiously. Her relationship with Roland was still somewhat distant, but it was honest in a way it had never been before. Any idea what about? I think she's getting remarried, Roland said. She mentioned someone named Scott a few times. Seems nice. How do you feel about that? Roland shrugged. It's her life. I barely remember when you guys were together. And honestly, he met Marcus's eyes. You're my real parent. You always have been. Mom's trying now, and I respect that. But you're the one who raised me. Marcus's throat tightened. That means a lot, buddy. There's something else. Roland set his phone down. I've been thinking about college applications, and I want to study architecture. Marcus felt something bloom in his chest. Pride and fear and hope all tangled together. Because of me? Partly. But also because I've watched you design buildings that matter. Schools and libraries and community centers. Places that help people. That's what I want to do. Roland's expression was earnest. I want to build things that last. That means something. You showed me that was possible. Marcus crossed the room and pulled his son into a hug. Roland hugged him back, solid and real and proof that surviving Willie Conway had been worth every brutal step. You'll be better than I am, Marcus said. You're already better than I was at 15. High bar, Dad, Roland teased. You've told me the stories. Questionable fashion choices, terrible poetry, that whole garage band thing. They laughed, and the moment passed into the easy affection they'd built over 15 years. But later, after Roland had gone to play video games with his friends online, Marcus sat in his office and let himself remember. He remembered a 2-year-old boy holding a juice cup with both hands, the cup slipping, liquid spreading across expensive hardwood. He remembered Willie's face, hard and certain, the command delivered like it was reasonable. Hit him, or I will. He remembered the weight of Roland in his arms as he walked out, Felicia's protests fading behind them, the gamble that he could build something better from nothing. And he'd done it. Despite the custody battle, despite starting over in a new city, despite all of Willie Conway's attempts to prove that Marcus Murphy was nothing without the Conway name and money. He'd built a life, a career, a relationship with his son that was everything Willie's empire wasn't. Real, loving, built on actual foundation instead of sand. Willie's final phone call still echoed sometimes, late at night when Marcus couldn't sleep. The desperation in the old man's voice, the collapse of all his certainty, the moment when he'd realized that every bridge he'd burned was one he'd eventually need. And Roland's 5 words, asked in innocent confusion, "Why would Dad help you?" Marcus had never told his son what those words meant to Willie, how they distilled a lifetime of cruelty into a single, devastating question. Maybe someday he would, when Roland was older and could understand the full scope of what had happened. Or maybe he wouldn't. Maybe it was enough that Roland had grown up safe, loved, and free from the poison Willie had tried to inject into their lives. The business press had moved on from the Conway development collapse years ago. Willie's obituary had been respectful but brief. The world had forgotten him with the same speed with which it forgets all failed emperors. But Marcus remembered. He remembered as a lesson, as a warning, as proof that control isn't love and money can't buy what matters. He remembered so he could be different, better, the father his son deserved rather than the father Willie Conway had been to Felicia. On Roland's 16th birthday, Marcus gave him a bound book. Inside were photos and stories from the past 14 years. Roland's first day of school, his soccer games, his science fair victories, the trip they'd taken to Washington, D.C., the camping disaster in Michigan when their tent collapsed in a storm and they'd laughed so hard they cried. Your history, Marcus said. Not the Conway version or anyone else's. Just ours. Roland flipped through the pages, lingering on photos of the two of them building a treehouse, carving Halloween pumpkins, studying constellations. On the last page, Marcus had written a single paragraph. You are my greatest achievement. Not the buildings I've designed or the awards I've won, but the young man you've become. Strong, kind, curious, and free. Never let anyone tell you that love comes with conditions or that worth is measured in dollars. You are valuable because you exist, because you are Roland Murphy, and that will always be enough. Roland read it twice, his eyes suspiciously bright. Then he set the book down carefully and hugged his father with the fierce grip of someone who understands what they've been given. Thanks, Dad, he whispered. For everything. For leaving. For fighting. For choosing me. Every time, Marcus said. Every single time. Outside, the Cleveland evening faded into night. In Chicago, Felicia was building her new life with careful determination. Carla Conway lived alone in a much smaller house, surrounded by photographs of a family that no longer existed. The Conway development buildings still stood across 3 states, monuments to a man who'd understood construction but never understood foundation. And in Cleveland Heights, in a modest house with a yard and good schools and neighbors who knew them as just Marcus and Roland Murphy, a father and son sat together looking through memories they'd built from nothing but love and stubbornness and the absolute certainty that they were worth more than Willie Conway could ever understand. Marcus had won, though not in the way Willie would have measured victory. He hadn't crushed an enemy or seized an empire. He'd simply survived with his integrity intact and raised a son who could ask, "Why would Dad help you?" Because kindness wasn't transactional and love didn't come with conditions. That was victory enough. That was victory complete. And when Roland eventually left for college, studying architecture at Carnegie Mellon, Marcus would watch him go with pride and confidence. Roland would build his own life, his own career, his own relationships, all of them on solid foundation, all of them free from the Conway curse of control masquerading as love. Willie Conway had wanted a legacy. He'd gotten one. A cautionary tale about what happens when you confuse ownership with family, when you believe people are assets to be managed rather than souls to be cherished. Marcus's legacy was simpler and infinitely more valuable. A son who knew he was loved. A career built on creating spaces that helped people. A life that proved you could start with nothing and build everything that mattered. On particularly quiet nights, Marcus sometimes thought about that moment in the Winnetka house. Juice spreading on hardwood, Willie's voice like a hammer, the choice crystallizing in front of him. He'd picked up his son and walked out, not knowing if he could make it work, only knowing he had to try. It had worked. Against odds and opposition and a man who weaponized money like other people weaponized fists. It had worked because Marcus refused to break, refused to let Willie Conway define what family meant or what love looked like. And that refusal, that stubborn determination to build something better from rubble, turned out to be the only weapon Willie Conway had no defense against. Marcus had won by walking away, by raising Roland right, by being the father Willie Conway couldn't comprehend, and by teaching his son that some questions, "Why would Dad help you?" contain entire worlds of truth about who deserves help and who deserves nothing but the consequences of their choices. The phone never rang again with desperate pleas. The Conway name faded from business journals and society pages. Willie's empire became a case study in business schools about over-leveraging and market timing, stripped of the human cost that had built it. And in Cleveland, in Detroit, in every city where Marcus Murphy's buildings rose, schools and libraries and community centers designed with love and attention and the absolute certainty that architecture should serve people, not egos, Willie Conway's true legacy stood in stark contrast. One man had built monuments to himself that collapsed under their own weight. The other had built a son who would build monuments to community that would outlast them all. Marcus knew which legacy would endure. And that knowledge, more than any revenge or confrontation or moment of Willie's humiliation, was the sweetest victory of all. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.